and this matchup used to favor humans quite a bit, but now this 4-color version of the deck has things like Oko, you mentioned before, to kind of shore things up a little bit. That card historically lining up pretty well against creatures.
Hobbs, by virtue of being second in his group, gets to be on the play. Starts on a Bauble and a Thoughtseize. So checks the top card of Barone's deck and then gets to look at his hand to better inform decisions here. See Mantis Rider. Looks like 2 Mantis Riders, Reflector Mage, Champion of the Parish, Aether Vial, and a pair of lands.
All right, this is a human deck. This is the draw, right? This is exactly what you would expect.
These are humans cards. These are cards they play. So we have Aether Vial and Champion on 1, and then 3 3-drops. And actually not the 3rd land yet. So there's a lot of different ways Hobbs can attack this.
Right. So the big thing here that I would be focusing on are these 3-drops. The big reason for that being Reflector Mage is good at tagging your low tall creature deck, and Mantis Rider gives you a ton of reach against the pay 11 life tempo deck.
All right, so you're going to go after the 3-drops. Is there any consideration for taking Aether Vial to slow him down on making multiple 3-drops?
Right, so here we see Hobbs kind of leaning into that Aether Vial, because if you can just stay ahead and answer these cards one at a time, you're going to end up being okay.
That's what he does. Takes the Vial and draws off the Bauble. That's me for the first turn. Hobbs down to 17. Thanks to doing some damage off his own lands. Those Nurturing Peatland. It's pretty straightforward. Barone has that Champion of the Parish. A lot of pressure on him. I mean, he has 3 draws to do it, but really needs to find that 3rd land for this hand to play.
Right, and you're not going to get that much time against something like a Death Shadow deck compared to some of the other Thoughtseize decks of the format. This deck is known for just cranking out 5/5, 6/6s, and so on.
Barone, our Season 2. Both these players, actually, are not qualified for the Players' Championship until just a few weeks ago. On Hobbs, 3 weeks ago, on Hobbs' side, he was the last at-large player to make it into this event. On Barone's side, he was the Season 2 Invitational winner. Both of them started the weekend outside the field and played their way in.
Right, and this is a spot where, Hobbs has really made a name for himself playing these tempo strategies like Death Shadow, but I almost want to give the nod to Barone here in the matchup, right? He made the top 4 of a Modern Classic a few months ago to qualify for the Invitational, and then it feels like he just stomped the Invitational on the back of these small ball creature aggro strategies. So he is right at home here.
Yeah, especially with this kind of hand. I do still like Chris in the matchup. These 3-drops are really powerful.
Exactly. At this point, he just needs to try and actually get to the point where he can start casting them. And, let's think of it this way. If he's not missing land drops, what is he drawing instead? Spells.
Champion of the Parish from Chris. Hobbs playing with open information here. On the Death Shadow side, especially when he knows about this hand, there feels like there's a lot of tension on Hobbs' side. He wants to get his life total lower, but at the same time, against Reflector Mage and Mantis Riders, he has to really be careful to not go too low on life points.
Right, there's only so much of that work that you can afford to do yourself.
And we see one of the Singleton Tarmogoyf. It's the play for Hobbs. It's his only copy of it in the deck. Here is a 3/4.
Going to be nice to have artifacts in the graveyard against something like humans, which actually ends up making creatures where sizing becomes an issue.
I actually really like the Tarmogoyf here. I mentioned it's only a 1 of in Hobbs' deck, but I think he's pretty happy to see it in this matchup.
Right, and, we see a Thought Scour hanging out in his hand, and that's the type of card that can just change the size of this Tarmogoyf mid-combat.
Back to Barone we go. Looks like he picked up a copy of Noble Hierarch. Certainly some play to that card here.
Hey, speaking of some play, sounds to me like he's going to get to play some of those 3s.
Is the land drop. Now I'm wondering if he has picked up another 1-drop, he could actually make an attack this turn. And is that the case? The answer is no, it's going to be Meddling Mage. So Champion grows to a 2/2. No attacks here. We'll see what the name is, though. And I like this. Fatal Push is the call.
Big one. with the open decklist situation in this Players' Championship, Barone knows that that is the removal spell Hobbs has the most copies of in his 75.
Yeah, Hobbs actually with a good diversity here. It's 3 Fatal Push, so that is the one to name. But 1 Drown in the Lock, 1 Assassin's Trophy, 1 Dismember. He'll lead on a Thought Scour, grow his Tarmogoyf to a 5/6.
It's not bad. The big thing that Hobbs needs to try and prioritize here is pressure, right? If you end up just trying to go toe-to-toe with this Humans deck, you will eventually just have them go around you because their deck is so redundant and can create so many bodies on the battlefield.
Yeah, and if we look at here, there is a Fatal Push in Hobbs' hand. So some
Are there 2?
Ooh, there might be. That'd be big. He does have a Gurmag Angler that he could make here, but I think his worry is that he knows there's a Reflector Mage, and attacking with Goyf, casting Gurmag Angler, it's just not likely to work.
Right. Oh, it's a second Gurmag Angler in hand. Oh. Can you believe it? That might actually be something worse than the second Fatal Push.
Second Fatal Push, at least when you draw a removal spell, has a world where it gets better.
Right, it helps you sort of build this house of cards against the house of cards that Barone is building with this Meddling Mage. But now, you can only cast so many Gurmag Anglers.
Well, he's going to fetch here. He attacks in for 5. He can play the Angler, however, it's very likely that it will get bounced. And Hobbs knows that. He did see the Reflector Mage. So a Delve of 5 takes the damage off the Peatland. And these last ones are going to shrink his Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, this is the point where Hobbs is trying to weigh what are the cards that are easiest to end up putting back in the graveyard.
Yeah, he kept land instant in his yard, and then there's an artifact in Barone's.
I think there's a strong case for maybe exiling the land, since if worse comes to worse, you can crack your Peatland.
On Chris's side, he didn't play a Noble Hierarch last turn, which I was going to say made me think he had the land, but it looks like he didn't.
No, I think at this point he just wanted to try and lock down Fatal Push. The idea here is that the sooner you lock those cards down, the more powerful your cards are going to be, or the bigger effect you're going to see these Meddling Mages have.
Yeah, and this is a big gift for Hobbs, the fact that Barone did not find that third land. He Meddling Maged the Fatal Push just so that this Noble Hierarch wouldn't get Fatal Pushed. I think he was hoping that this wouldn't matter. He'd draw the land, cast the Reflector Mage, things would be fine. But now...
This is big.
It's close, right? I mean, Hobbs might even be able to get the second Angler out.
Right, and now there's this Tarmogoyf that can actually attack, because if Barone goes for a double block, you're probably happy trading Tarmogoyf for just the Meddling Mage because it unlocks your Fatal Push.
Bauble checks the top card of Barone's deck. Yeah, with a Fatal Push in your hand, you have to be happy of really any outcome. There, the Meddling Mage leaves the table. And here's a swing. It's for 8, so put Chris down to 7.
Love this attack from Hobbs.
Hobbs' hand is Gurmag Angler and Fatal Push. Neither of them are castable yet.
Give it a second. If you double block on this Tarmogoyf, then there's a 4th card in graveyard, Gurmag Angler, and so on.
Yeah, a double block here is so good for Hobbs. He can cast the Angler. He'll free up the Fatal Push. Ooh, and that's what's going to happen.
And, I see how we get here from Barone's side.
Yeah.
There are only a couple of cards in Hobbs' hand. Barone is really just trying to prioritize staying alive.
Yeah, and how happy is Hobbs to see this happen?
Oh, unbelievably.
Fatal Pushes away the heart. Okay. So how do you feel? He had the option to make second Angler and went for the Fatal Push instead.
Well, he still could have made the other Angler.
Oh, he can just do it all because the Fatal Push is in the yard now.
Right.
2 cards in hand. Yeah, looks like he chose not to. That might come back to get him. We'll see. Depends what that last card in hand is. Okay, here's an attack for 3.
You're definitely casting that creature pre-combat if it matters.
Yeah, here is Phantasmal Image. It's going to copy Gurmag Angler. Now, if Hobbs wants to, if he finds a Fatal Push, he can Fatal Push down the image, even though it's 7 drop. Fatal Push.
Oko would kill it
anything.
Too.
Yeah. So Hobbs down to 8, Barone at 10. Hobbs thinking about drawing a card with that Peatland. Yeah, he has an Angler, and there's one more hiding out behind it. I don't know what it is.
Looks like a Stubborn Denial.
It's enough that he chose not to cast the Angler. So presumably it's an instant. And see Hobbs doing some math here. We are still holding on Chris's end step. Yeah, Stubborn Denial's the card. And that was the priority he made. That's why he didn't make the Angler. He really wanted to hold up that Stubborn Denial. Not really much.
Street Wraith off the top.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, he's going to cycle. Goes to 6. Draws into, it's a black card. I mean, he'd love to find Teamer Battle Rage.
Another Street Wraith. These are starting to get risky.
The second one makes that Angler lethal. So he will draw a card off the peatland. Finds Dismember.
If you ever wanted to be a Gurbag Angler, to be a Death Shadow so bad in your life.
And you know, he can maybe make the second Angler. Right, there's the concern that he knows there's a Reflector Mage in Barone's hand, and he's dead to it. But he's also dead to the Mantis Riders. He's just dead to a lot.
Right.
Even if he makes 2 blockers, Barone, when Barone draws the third land, Hobbs is very close to dead.
Correct.
Right? A Mantis Rider swings in, deals 3, swings in again, deals 3, dead. And it can chump block while it does it. And you see Barone knows that, so he's actually just going to trade Anglers. Another Gurmag Angler from Hobbs, but yeah, Barone can just chump his way until that land shows up.
Right.
Stubborn Denial in Hobbs' hand doesn't do much. Street Wraith in Hobbs' hand is Stubborn Denial, Street Wraith, Dismember. None of these are cards I'm excited about.
Yeah. Well, you know, if you find another land, Dismember is just a hero's downfall.
Uh-oh. Island, we found the card. Is it an embarrassment of riches here? He's debating whether Mantis Rider or Reflector Mage is better, and who cares? Right? They're both, they both win. And here's the swing. Hobbs down to 2. So 2 lethal attackers next turn from Barone. Hobbs does not have a block and picks up the cards.
Wow, that was really back and forth. In a lot of ways, Hobbs was kind of just hoping that Barone didn't find that land.
Yeah, I mean, it was on a razor's edge. From the initial Thoughtseize, it looked like it was going to be a runaway game for Chris. And on Chris's side, he probably felt the same way. Things started to go bad for him, and for a second, Chris must have had to ask himself, am I really going to lose this? Is that what's about to happen?
Right, and there was just that turn where Barone got a little bit of breathing room, and it felt like that was the turning moment.
Right, perhaps when he could have gone, there was that second Gurmag Angler that could have been made, and it was delayed by a turn, and I think that might have cost Hobbs a game.
I agree.
But he will get some time to recover. He did, remember, win the last matchup between these two players. They played earlier in the day in Legacy. Hobbs was the winner. That's why we call it a grudge match. Barone looking to even the score, as it were. And so far doing just that. He's up 1-0. Now, let's go back then to some sideboards. So for John Hobbs, right, there looked to be a lot of dead cards in this matchup.
Right, Stubborn Denial, pretty embarrassing. A lot of the things that are going to be attacking spells rather than creatures, obviously not going to line up against the Vials, Lands, and Creatures deck.
So the biggest card I'm looking for, Barone's playing a tribal deck. He's playing humans. 2 Plague Engineer in John's sideboard.
You love to see them.
Right.
And then in Hobbs, you even see some copies of cards like Traverse the Ulvenwald to help you find them.
Yeah, he does have those, so he has Plague Engineers 2 up, so he should have some redundancy on those. Additional removal, Assassin's Trophy, Drown in the Lock. I have to think he's going to play all of this.
Oh yeah, you're just looking to cut your spell removal for creature removal. Effectively, he's going to be change his game, the specifics of his game, but not the game plan itself.
Right.
You could even make a strong case here for Mystical Dispute if he has enough cards that he really wants to be getting out of his deck. The card does tag Phantasmal Image, Reflector Mage, and Mantis Rider. It is soft to both Vial and Cavern of Souls, but depending on how many cards Hobbs just wants to shove in his sideboard out of his main deck, you could end up making a case for that card.
Yeah, actually, Mystical Dispute, I do kind of like it here. There are a lot of things in Hobbs' main deck. Yeah, Stubborn Denials. At some point, these 7 discard spells, I'm not sure he wants all 7 of them. That's a lot.
The cards are a little bit weak in this matchup. Thoughtseize in particular is one that can end up just really biting you.
So for Star City, we have our holiday sale over at our store. We have 15% off all our online orders. You can find this on our website. Make sure you use the promo code SCG15. That's 15 for 15% off. Now on Barone's side, he actually does have some things he can do here post board as well. We're looking at things like Deputy of Detention.
Auriok Champion.
That is big
fan
deal.
of that, especially since Hobbs has elected to lean more into Gurmag Angler than Tormagoyf.
Right.
That card is incredibly attractive here. Obviously, it's a little soft to something like Plague Engineer, but if your opponent has that card against your humans deck, it's going to be good. Tell me something I don't know.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. The Plague Engineer thing. Barone has to bring in these 2 Dismembers then, right?
Oh, Dismember, going to be great here, just because it can also tag things like Gurmag Angler, or just let your creatures beat up on Hobbs creatures in combat and turn it into a combat trick.
Hobbs on a mulligan here for the second game. Over on our time shifted match, we have another win and in for day 2 between Dom Harvey and Drake Sasser. It's Humans versus Titan Shift. We'll get to see that one as well.
Looking forward to seeing that match as well. It feels like there's a lot going on there, especially with the linear version of Titan Shift that Harvey's brought this weekend.
Another one of those chances at a grudge match. Dom Harvey winning their matchup earlier today. Dom with a win and in last round against Colin Roundtree for day 2. He missed on that. He gets another try at it this round. Hobbs now looking at a 6-card hand. This kind of matchup can be tougher for Death Shadow. It's a deck that, almost in a Delver-style strategy, wants to get 1 or 2 threats out and then protect them and end the game.
Exactly. It's very much a sort of tempo-y protect the queen strategy.
Keeps 1 to the bottom. Hobbs checks his own top card to start here. See him do that before a fetch land. Good sequencing on his side. You see Dismember, 2 lands, and draws a card. Might be a Plague Engineer in there. And he draws Oko for the turn.
Ooh, have you ever named Elk with Plague Engineer before?
I have not. That sounds excellent. All you need to do is get 3 Plague Engineers out. All of them on Elk.
All right, notice this shift. Hobbs fetching a tapped breeding pool on Barone's instep.
Right.
Not desperate to pay a bunch of life down now that he's sort of adopted this more reactive stance with cards like Oko and Plague Engineer.
This is really interesting. It shows that he's willing to let Chris do the work for him in attacking. That he actually just needs some extra time. Now, the question is whether Chris is going to hold up for a bit before he starts attacking.
There is always that weird sort of counterplay where if your opponent's at 18 and you only have, say, 5 or 6 power, you kind of go, do I want to let them have a Death Shadow, or...
So Hobbs checks Barone's top card. Shocks, draws a card off Bauble. So still no plays yet. But he does have that Plague Engineer hiding out for next turn. 2 of on the sideboard is his best card in the matchup.
And that could end up being brutal if Barone plays something like an Auriok Champion, expecting that card to just go the distance.
So Cavern from Chris. And yeah, at this point on Chris's side, so you're playing humans and you've seen Death Shadow. Post board, your opponent is not playing, didn't play anything on turn 1, didn't play anything on turn 2. You know what's going on the sideboard. You have reads on what's happening.
So at this point, if you're on Barone's side of the table, you're really just trying to figure out which 3-drops you can beat, right? Hobbs is obviously taking a more reactive stance. He didn't have any sort of hand disruption. He hasn't jammed any early creatures. You got to figure out, Hobbs is a living, breathing human. You're at the Players' Championship. You know he's a smart person. Why did he keep his 6-card hand? So you're going to be leaning towards some of these powerful 3-drops and figuring out how you want to posture against them. Because the way that you posture against Oko is not the same way that you're going to posture against Plague Engineer.
Second champion of the parish, a swing in from Barone. Is there more? He has a third champion of the parish, it looks like. Is there a reason he wouldn't commit that, though, if he had it? It feels like that's something
Maybe
he'd run
he's an
out.
Aether Vial?
Yeah, and it looks like he actually did have third champion, and he's choosing this Aether Vial over it. We see end step. It is Dismember on the 2/2 champion. And this is nice from Hobbs. It's going to lock down the creatures from Chris's side, because you know there's Plague Engineer heading toward the battlefield now.
All right. Be honest. How do you feel about ending your third turn against humans when they have no creatures in play?
I love it.
Big
and then
fan.
Revile on 0. There's everything I like about this. I mean, there's even a champion of the parish in Chris's hand that's just not a card anymore.
Right. At this point, Barone really needs to find something like a Deputy of Detention, a Dismember of his own.
There is the Plague Engineer. And yeah, you see just a
Cannot
flick
get
of the
it down
hands
fast
from Chris.
enough.
Yeah, I guess that happens.
What do you... Hobbs just saying, what creature type do you think I'm naming? It's not Soldier.
Deputy of Detention, though, I believe was the draw for Chris.
Oh, that's a pickup.
Here we see Mantis Rider, Deputy. I don't know that he has the land, though. Thalia.
Ooh.
Yeah, most of these are cards he just can't play right now. They would be dead on arrival. Yeah, Thalia. Thalia's Lieutenant. None of those are good. Chris just has to pass.
Wow.
Big opportunity for Hobbs. Chris's deck has not been cooperating on the land front, and this gives John an opportunity to cast Oko. Takes 1, and he will make the Planeswalker.
Love this
Love
play.
this elk. Yeah, turns the Aether Vial into an elk. He wants to keep Chris off that mana.
There's also a point where we can assume that Cavern was on human, which means that it could end up throwing Barone off depending on what other land he ends up drawing here with this Deputy of Detention.
All the 3/3 elk will attack Oko. Hobbs not going to block or trade with that Plague Engineer. So, and that is it. Chris misses the land again. Hobbs with a golden opportunity to even the score.
This is how it happens.
And he'll Thoughtscar himself. You see in hand Teamer Battle Rage and Assassin's Trophy. Picks up another land there. So Hobbs has an advantage right now with this Oko, though he, to be fair, doesn't have any way to start dealing damage.
Well, the nice thing about Oko...
Eventually,
he,
yeah.
He is just a multi-talented fellow.
That makes another food token. Yeah, because Hobbs is on a mana denial plan here, he can't actually use that Assassin's Trophy.
What does Barone's land suite look like?
Barone has an island and a plains.
Okay, I was going to say if he's really out there and maybe on a no basics play, an Assassin's Trophy doing a sinkhole impression could be in the cards.
Yeah, it is 20 lands, so 2 waterlogged groves, 2 basics, and then 4 ofs.
Sure.
Back to Chris we go. The elk can attack. It can attack Oko down to 1. But he really needs a land. He has a full grip of cards.
And there is such a colossal difference between 1 loyalty on Oko and no loyalty on Oko.
Yeah, Oko is not a planeswalker that gets attacked down very often.
Bright side, human stack, good at attacking. Even when it's an elk getting into the red zone.
Swing here, Meddling Mage, the pickup for Chris. Now has to decide if he wants to cast it. It would be a 1/1. If it is, what does he name? Last time he named Fatal Push, but based on the way this game is played out, it doesn't feel like it's likely that Hobbs has Fatal Push.
Yeah, and that kind of comes down to if Hobbs actually wants to even try to protect this Oko, if it feels like it can just protect itself.
I don't think there's any great names. Yeah, you get a name Death's Shadow. I actually like that.
Sure, that's fine. At this point, you're probably just naming any creature.
Yeah, because that's what Hobbs is missing.
Right.
It's a good threat. I mean, and on Chris's side, it might be underwhelming to cast Meddling Mage, but as soon as he draws a land, I mean, he's not using the mana anyway, and as soon as he draws a land, he's playing 3-drops for the rest of the game.
Drew a Death Shadow.
Oh my goodness. So a great name for Barone.
It's what we call a Thoughtseize bug.
And Hobbs Thought Scars himself into another land, so not actually any help here. He makes an Elk blocker, but then has to pass. And Chris, if he hits that land, he might still be live to win this game.
Honestly, he's in a pretty okay position if he can just start actually getting onto the battlefield here.
Right, a land here, and he has Mantis Rider. Oko's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's fine. He needs the land, though. Finds Phantasmal Image. So I'm looking at Plague Engineer as the thing to image here. Engineer, a creature. The creature type on it is Carrier.
Is there a world? Maybe this is to level 1 million, but Phantasmal Imaging, copy your Aether Vial that is now an Elk, and it would enter the battlefield
and then
as
it's an Aether Vial? I guess the problem is that it's going to get elked
too many
next.
turns.
It's going to get elked, right?
No matter what it is, yeah, Oko just gets it. You're right.
Huh. So maybe you don't even... I mean, generally you wouldn't cast on this board, but because he has 5 other cards in hand... Ooh, I have one. All right, here's what you do. You swing both creatures at Oko.
Mm-hmm.
Hobbs eats your 1/1 with his Plague Engineer. Then post-combat, you image the Plague Engineer and kill Hobbs' Plague Engineer. You lose your guy, but now there's not an engineer on human anymore.
That's a play, for sure.
I think, what's the worst-case scenario? The worst-case scenario is if Hobbs makes a smarter block, you threw away your Meddling Mage. Okay, that's fine. I don't even think this Meddling Mage is very good.
Looks like there may be a little bit of a communication thing.
Here's
just trying
Phantasmal
to...
Image.
I could see how that could be confusing if you wanted to just name Elk with Plague Engineer, but just say Elk when you put the image down.
So, okay, is that what he named Elk? Okay. Which he names Elk. So image is on Plague Engineer naming Elk.
I believe that is the case.
So this gives Hobbs, he has options. And I think we're going to see the Assassin's Trophy. And if you see the Assassin's Trophy on the image, or rather, how about Temur Battle Rage on the image?
Oh.
And a trade here.
Now, Hobbs has the ability to Elk the Meddling Mage and cast Death Shadow.
Because he does have one.
Right. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, 2 cards in Hobbs' hand, Assassin's Trophy and Death's Shadow. Draws Inquisition of Kozilek. That's pretty free here. He's going to make a food. Actually, let's decide.
Sure.
Inquisition will be the cast. He gets to see the hand. Deputy of Detention, Mantis Rider, 2 Thalia's Lieutenants, Champion of the Parish, and Thalia. So, if this Plague Engineer dies, a lot of stuff's about to happen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you
stake the deputy.
You're just protecting Plague Engineer, and so here's what you do if you're in Hobbs' spot writing this hand down. You write down Mantis Rider, and then tell your opponent they can pick their hand up.
And Hobbs passes. Is it a land yet? For Barone, yes it is. Here's Mantis Rider. It can attack in for 2. Yeah, we'll do that. And get met by Assassin's Trophy. And now we're reaching a spot. All the creatures in Chris's hand are dead on arrival. They're all X1s.
Plague Engineer's a messed up magic card.
It's not doing too bad here. Now, I guess Chris can dump these Thalia's lieutenants onto the board dead to pump the Meddling Mage. That is what they do.
You know what? I'll tell you something, Matthias. That is a legal play.
Yeah. It's one we might even see.
Barone is allowed to do it.
I mean, if we can't remove Plague Engineer, he's probably got to start making plays before this Oko wins the game.
Sure.
Oko turns Meddling Mage into an Elk, casts Death Shadow, currently a 3/3. However, there is, a fetch land up for John Hobbs. And yeah, this Plague Engineer just becoming the whole story. It's Waterlogged Grove for Chris. He'll immediately go through it to get a new card, trying to find a Deputy of Detention. He finds a 3-drop. Is it the Deputy?
What if it's a Reflector Mage?
It is. Okay, it is the Mantis Rider. That's actually not bad. It's going to go after Oko. Oko down to 3.
So, one thing here is if Barone can Reflector Mage Plague Engineer, that gives him a turn of breathing room to make
everything.
all the things in his hand a little bit bigger than an X1. Sure, there will be one creature that ends up dying, but most of them will survive.
See Hobbs just playing the control game with Oko. Goes ahead and Elks the Mantis Rider. And he's in such a great spot, right? He has a Death Shadow that's bigger than a 3/3.
Right, he needs to find something else to do. He has a land hiding out in his hand. Eventually, Barone will be able to overpower this Oko.
Is that actually true, though? So if Hobbs can just sit here with the Oko forever behind this Death Shadow, how does Barone actually get through this?
Having enough creatures. It's a point where if Hobbs just keeps elking everything Barone does, that's not going to last forever. Hobbs needs to actually find something else to do.
So like this Phantasmal Image from Barone. What I kind of want to see, he has, I believe, 4 copies of Phantasmal Image. If he waits until he draws another image, he could double image the Plague Engineer to kill the Plague Engineer.
Oh, interesting, yes.
Like, he just has to get this Plague Engineer off the board. I don't know that anything else matters.
Sure.
A pair of 3/3s. Can't really attack with them.
So theoretically, you could image your Mantis Rider and send everything at Oko.
Maybe that's the play he's looking at. You'd either get the Plague Engineer or the Oko.
Correct.
I think that's what he's looking at. It's Phantasmal Image. Copies Plague Engineer. But that's not going to stick around very long. Oko can just take care of that.
Sure, at this point it may just be that he's trying to prevent Hobbs from elking his own food.
Yeah.
And starting to produce blockers that way.
Copied Plague Engineer is on Elk. But I mean, I don't know if it matters what this engineer's targeting, right? It's
not
the
really.
Oko's going to shoot it. Hobbs down to 9.
I believe that's all of Hobbs' fetchable lands.
But on Hobbs' side, he does his 2 Watery Graves. He has looks like 5 Shocklands and 1 basic. So you would be right. He cannot fetch anymore. Can play this Nurturing Peatland he drew. And he elks his own food token, as opposed to shooting down the image.
This seems fine. The card that he top decked for turn was a copy of Fatal Push, which will be able to do something about this Phantasmal Image in a pinch.
Yeah, that's great, actually. Sorry, and his land was a fetch land. It cannot find anything. It can enable Revolt, if that matters.
And it can pay a life.
And it can pay a life, which is an upside.
Right. What a sentence.
Back over to Barone. His hand all X1s. This Plague Engineer is the story of the game.
Right, and we just see Barone trying to solve this battlefield.
It's another phantasmal image. Hold on.
Ooh.
So this is the situation I was talking about. If he'd held on the first image, he actually could have killed the Plague Engineer here.
Right, right.
He could have set Carrier twice. And that feels like a missed opportunity. I think it would unlock his hand.
Absolutely.
As it is, he set them both to Elk.
Okay, sure.
All right, which means these are down. You know, this is a 1/1 Elk. He can swing pretty freely here. Plague Engineers do have Death Touch. So Death Shadow is going to eat an Elk. And this 3/3 on Hobbs' side. Going to trade with Plague Engineer. Actually, not trade. It's just going to chump block. Or it would, except that Hobbs has a Fatal Push. So he can remove one of these Plague Engineers, and then he'll get the other one.
Right.
Yeah, and that seems great. This board cleanup means that it's a trade. He eats it. And a food token here. We do actually have an update on our other grudge match. That one finishing. It is Drake Sasser with the win over Dom Harvey. So Drake advances to day 2. He's playing humans. It might just be a 2-0 sweep for humans. We'll see. For Dom Harvey, after a 2-0 start, losing 2 shots to make it to day 2. So he is going to be in the bottom bracket here. The play to stays for the remainder of the day. See if he can. So record at 2-2. You know, the bottom 4 players in the field get eliminated at the end of the day, and Dom is going to have to fight off elimination.
Right, and speaking of fighting off, Hobbs not going down without a fight, finally starting to turn the corner here.
Right, finally it's to attack back, and this is because he has a second Death Shadow.
Exactly, he's starting to actually find some gasoline off the top of his library.
And it really comes down to a story of this Plague Engineer that held off Chris's hand, and Oko that turned around the game.
Oko and Plague Engineer have just done it all.
Right. Barone to 11. His whole hand is still uncastable, and it looks like we're going to head toward a game 3.
Right, he is just holding on by a thread at this point.
Dismembered by Chris. Okay, hold on. Ooh. Yeah, it takes care of Plague Engineer. This is one of his sideboard cards. He can now start casting his hand.
Okay, this is how it happens.
All right, Champion of the Parish. Starts there. Thalia's Lieutenant gets a 3/3. Is this enough, though? Hobbs has 2 Death Shadows and an Oko at this point.
Right, and Oko being able to Elk things is huge.
Well, here is a Once Upon a Time. The Hobbs will hardcast. He has 2 copies in the deck. Top 5 gets a creature or a land. He finds Plague Engineer. And just when Chris thought he was out from under it, Hobbs finds another, takes care of the Thalia's Lieutenant.
Close game.
Reestablishes the lock. And that should just about do it.
And that's a lot of the power of something like Once Upon a Time, is you're just so much better at finding the sideboard cards that it grabs.
Yeah, even when you pay 2 for it, it is a fine card.
Oh, absolutely.
Swing with both Death Shadows. And an Elk. Hill was going to send the team. Both Shadows are 4/4s. Elk is a 3/3. This is a swing for 10.
Right.
For 11.
This attack here is great. It means that Barone cannot double block a shadow without dying.
Right. He actually just picks up the cards. So Hobbs evens things up here at 1 game apiece. Some back and forth there really from both players.
Yeah, absolutely. That game ended up actually being quite close. We saw Hobbs flood out a little bit, but just have the hammers he has for this matchup are so powerful.
And it means they are going to head to a 3rd game. For a second there, it felt like Barone had some opportunities to get out from under the Plague Engineer, but And actually, he actually finally did at the end, but then Hobbs reestablishing it.
Yeah, and it was just too little too late. There were several turns where it felt, well, if Barone hits a lane for this deputy detention, rips a reflector mage, there were opportunities, like, absolutely, but Hobbs gets just enough time to take it down.
So Barone will get a chance to be on the play for Game 3, maybe get by those 2 Plague Engineers. Now, if you like the chairs you're seeing here at the Players' Championship in our feature match area, they are brought to you by Carnox. So you can get these chairs and save 10% at checkout at carnox.com/SCG.
If I had to rate these chairs, I'm going to give them a comfy out of 10.
Oh, I like that.
Oh, yeah.
So for John Hobbs, just 20 years old from Marion, Indiana. This was really his breakout year on the tour. He got that last overall spot in a narrowing on a tiebreak over Ross Merriam as our last player in the event. And this has really just been, he has been one of the rookies here, I think, on our tour. 12 months ago, we didn't really know much about John Hobbs.
Right. I was talking to him at the hotel yesterday, and he actually missed the first 2 opens of this year because of how far. First one, needed a team for it, didn't have it. Second one, too far away. Third one goes to Dallas, ends up doing incredibly there.
Top 8s.
And saying, you know what? Let's try it. Let's go for it and see what happens. And that's just what can happen when you put your nose to the grind, put the work in, and are good.
Yeah, second top 8 in early February. He's top 8 had 2 of his first 3 opens for the season. Decided to make a run for it, and then top 8 of the Invitational at season 1.
Right.
And from there was able to hold on to enough points to make it into the Players' Championship.
Right. We saw him also get a win at a team open with him, Dominic Harvey, and Bertarioni. Incredibly strong team in hindsight, looking at all 3 of those players in the Players' Championship. It's easy to see how he got here.
And now you see 1 game win away from locking his spot into day 2 of the Players' Championship.
And this one's going to be a good bit harder with Barone on the play. That's going to naturally weaken a lot of these Inquisition of Kozilek Thoughtseize effects that you'll see from Hobbs, it giving Barone a chance to, say, cast an Aether Vial before Hobbs can take it.
It feels like it puts a lot of pressure on Hobbs to have one of the Plague Engineers again.
Right, he needs Plague Engineer. He really wants something like Fatal Push to make sure that he has that early layer of interaction.
Right. Now, he does have those 2 Plague Engineers and 2 copies of Once Upon a Time to help him find them. See if he can do it here for a 3rd game. A keep by Chris. Hobbs thinking about it. He was on 6 last time. That one ended up okay. Does he want to give this one a spin? And you can see it on his face. He's just not sure about
it. Is this the hand?
I think what I'd wonder sometimes with these matchups, say I had a hand that had Plague Engineer but was 1 land on the draw. That's the kind of thing that would make me, kind of head in hands. Like,
maybe if you have too many Street Wraiths, but you have a Plague Engineer.
Yeah, I have the Engineer. I did the hard part. Can I reasonably keep this?
Here's a hot take. The London Mulligan exists. Just throw it back. Maybe that's not
the
a hot
things you
take.
used to thought were borderline aren't borderline anymore. Throw them back.
All right, we're in.
He keeps. All right, Champion of the Pair. Starting turn 1. Hobbs checks his top card. Doesn't seem to like it. Gonna go ahead and throw it back with this fetch land. All right, that will be the play. So, down to 19. Is it farther?
Thumb in a watery grave up front.
There we go. It's a Death Shadow in his opener. So we might be okay with taking some early hits off Champion of the Parish.
Oh, yeah.
Overgrown Tomb will go down to 17. If he's heavy on discard, he's going to want to make sure to get it out before Chris is empty-handed. Street Wraith to 15. All right, some...
Oh, yeah. This is
some
a
high-velocity Death Shadow starts. He draws. And just says go.
Yep. Yep, just getting a card off the bobble, not having much else to do here.
And Meddling Mage from Barone. Will Hobbs respond? With a removal, he does not. So it's the 1/1 counter, and now we get to see what Barone names. Might just be Plague Engineer.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. We saw it just dominate the last game.
This is actually interesting. Chris decides to name Fatal Push. I am a bit surprised because I feel like if Fatal Push was in the deck, it would have already been fired. In the hand, it would have been fired off.
It's possible. The way that we see Hobbs paying life and cycling, Barone may have thought Hobbs is going to get a little greedy and look into fatal pushing after taking some damage from this champion of the parish in order to enable a quick Death Shadow. This is some of the leveling stuff that you'll see at this level of competition.
Sure, and Hobbs down to 13 then. Now down to 11. He actually does have the Plague Engineer in his hand. You see it up at the front. It's ready to go for next turn. But Hobbs is down to 11 already. And we'll see what can be done. It's Assassin's Trophy mana up for Hobbs. We know what's in his hand. He's hoping to use the removal spell on a creature and then clean up with Plague Engineer. See some Noble Hierarchs. Those ones not going to play particularly well here, as the Plague Engineer can clean them up.
And you have to think that Plague Engineer's on Barone's radar.
Well, I thought so, but then Meddling Mage didn't name it.
Well, he's not exposing anything that dies to it just yet. So it may just be his plan is to win through it.
All right. Here is a second. It's a Phantasmal Image. It's likely going to be on Meddling Mage. I guess Chris, John could with it on the stack. I love this. Love this. Okay, with it on the stack, he Assassin's Trophies the Meddling Mage. This means Image has no choice but to come down as a champion of the parish, which can be cleaned up by the Plague Engineer.
All right, this is going to come down to if Barone has anything to do with this land.
Yeah.
That he gets off the Assassin's Trophy.
So here's the thing. He's got Noble Hierarchs, but his basics are an island and a plains.
Okay.
So he can't make the Noble Hierarch to pump it. Phantasmal Image should be the other way around, right? Image is in play, not
right.
But now Image is a 1/1 champion. This is so good for Hobbs. I love the play. Now, right, the blowout is if Chris has another champion of the parish. He does not. It's going to be... Well, here's Horizon Canopy. Hold on. Okay, Noble Hierarch. It will pump both.
Ooh, this might actually be too much for a Plague Engineer to deal with.
This is too much damage because now it's 5 from the champion.
Yeah, this Exalted trigger is no joke.
Okay. And there's the swing. Exalted brings it up to 5, so this will put Hobbs to 6. Plague Engineer still feels like it's the play, but it might be the type of Plague Engineer that ends up just, you play it, you kill the Noble Hierarch, and then you trade.
It's also possible we see a Death Shadow and another Assassin's Trophy. You could theoretically just play your Death Shadow out. It'll be fairly large, and then you get to Assassin's Trophy, the Phantasmal Image copy of Champion of the Parish, and try to play a turn of cleanup in order to make sure you don't die after casting this Phantasmal Image. This Plague Engineer.
Right, Assassin's Trophy is in the hand for Hobbs. He is down to 6, however. You see a fetch land. Things are getting kind of closer than he might like. Here is the Death's Shadow. And I think, yeah, you're right. This is the play, leaving up Assassin's Trophy. Now, for Hobbs, his basic is a Swamp, so he can go to 5 to cast this trophy.
Oh, it certainly plays.
Yeah, I was wondering if he'd have to go to 3. That would be something try to avoid.
Right, and this is the kind of matchup where you're unlikely to try and punk your opponent out with something like Temur Battle Rage.
Right. He did have them in for game 2.
That's true, but that's something I would be less excited about when you're on the draw and more likely to be playing from behind.
I agree. For Barone, no immediate follow-up. It's going to be the Horizon Canopy to get an additional card. It's a 7/7 Death Shadow, likely an 8/8. Can he find more damage? Be looking for, ideally, a Reflector Mage here.
Right, and the magic number, in a lot of ways, kind of feels like staying above 3 life, so you can't get punked out by something like a Mantis Rider.
Right. So Chris has a Noble Hierarch. Looks like has a white creature of some kind here. Believe it's Thalia's Lieutenant. If it is, that is not bad. That is the card. So 2 counters on the Champ, 2 counters on the Image, 1 counter on the Hierarch. Really building some nice protection for himself against a Plague Engineer.
I like the way the Barone is navigated around Plague Engineer this game. He's
Right.
never exposed more than 1 creature at a time to it.
It's nice, right? He didn't Meddling Mage it, and in a sense, maybe he didn't have to.
Right. There's a spot where if you can just reduce the efficacy of the card, then you'll end up being okay.
And then Noble Hierarch. And again, this means counter on Champ, counter on Champ, counter on Lieutenant. It's still only a 1-for-1 to Plague Engineer.
Oh, wow.
And this is, he can attack through it, can't he?
Yes. Well,
Maybe.
it's complicated.
Okay, so it's a 7/7 Champ. It would exalt to a 9/9.
Right.
Which means if Hobbs fetches for a shock, then Hobbs goes to 3 and can eat it. But it means that Hobbs went to 3.
Well, to be fair, you also get to kill both of the champion of the parishes if you take that line.
And that might be good enough.
Right.
So
That puts you so far ahead if you just get to play Plague Engineer and then it's Noble Hierarch and Thalia's Lieutenant versus a 10/10 and a Plague Engineer.
And it looks like Barone, wise to it, just says go. And if I'm on Hobbs' side, I think you still have to Assassin's Trophy. You need to use that mana.
You have to use the mana here.
You know, you wish that you could have done some deception, gotten a better window, but Chris called your bluff. You know, no sense in sinking more into this.
Right. If you know that you're just going to end up having to cast all these 3-drops, you just need to prioritize spending your mana.
Yeah, it's 5 cards left.
Okay, so I see an Oko hiding out in Hobbs' hand. You
All right.
could even look at maybe doing something like Fetch, Shock, develop in Assassin's Trophy the real champion of the parish, and then Oko the image.
Because Oko is just great. It just kills the image.
Right.
So Champ's gone. Barone does have 2 basics, so he finds the plains. I think Hobbs may have stabilized here. This is really close.
It really is. So him taking down the bigger copy of Champion of the Parish is him effectively saying, I'm probably not going to cast a hard removal spell next turn and don't want to actually be in a spot where I'm forced to pay a bunch of life.
Let's see, Plague Engineer in Hobbs' hand. Is it time?
Well, you got 2 options. You got now or you got never.
Well, I like one of those more than the other.
It's understandable.
He also has Gurmag Angler. If he wants to cast both, he has to use a fetch land, and I think that's what he's thinking about. Is that worth it? I mean, 4 life, going down to 4 versus 5 here actually is different.
And he has already fetched his basic as well.
Okay, then I don't think 2 is a you can't do that.
2 is, that puts you dead to Mantis Rider even with a Plague Engineer on the battlefield.
So he's looking at Oko as well as an option. I mean, he'd love to have a 4th mana source so he could do something like Angler and one of these plays.
Oh, absolutely. I tend to lean towards the copy of Plague Engineer here.
I do too.
Plays a little bit safer against a lot of the top of Barone's library, but I do think there are some cases for wanting to go ahead and try to snowball an advantage with something like Oko.
Well, with Plague Engineer, the worst case scenario is if he plays Plague Engineer and Chris has a draw that does something.
Sure.
Hobbs might have to block and trade it away. Which I know he doesn't want to do, but maybe that's fine.
Sure.
Right? Because you'd kill the Hierarch when you cast it, and then maybe, let's say you do that, and then it has to trade with the Phantasmal Image.
Mm-hmm.
Not ideal, but you're still alive. And
Sure.
you did get a 2-for-1.
All right, well, it's fetching time.
It's fetch and shock time. Hobbs to 2.
All right, you're not beating Mantis Rider. That's fine.
Okay, do we have Temur Battle Rage? Is this just the other direction?
Ooh. I don't
this
think
just
he
the
would have
best-
slow rolled it like that if he did.
How good of a bluff would that be to fetch shock here and then swing with the Temur? If you just start this turn by swinging with the Death Shadow. just untap, swing Death Shadow, look your opponent in the eyes, and then just be like, you're going to jump block this?
Come on, double block, do it.
And it looks like, okay, here is Plague Engineer and Gurmag Angler, but this has left him open to Mantis Rider. Hold on.
I mean, look, if you were dead to the card, you were dead to the card. That's just the way it works.
Now he's real dead to it. Does Barone, to send him into day 2, have the Mantis Rider? I don't think so. No, he does not
Well, he didn't
immediately have
jam.
it. Yeah. Now he has to figure out if there's any way forward.
Okay.
Okay, wait, this is another chance at it because he has Noble Hierarch. Draws. No slam. No, hand on the table, face
I
down.
can't take this.
Yeah. Needs to find an out. And Hobbs has not left him with a lot of turns to do it.
And his biggest attacker would only be a 5/5.
Right, these creatures don't really work.
Not that great in the face of a 5/5 and an 11/11.
Right. I mean, he's almost just dead on the crackback here.
Right.
Deputy of Detention? Is that what I see here? That makes the turn interesting.
Might
okay.
play against this Death Shadow.
I mean, right, you have to remove the Death Shadow if you have a Deputy. It's an 11/11.
That's so many numbers.
That is a lot of your life total.
When you look at a creature stat box and see 4 digits, that's kind of horrifying.
Yeah, that's too many numbers.
How many fingers do you think I have?
I don't even know how to count to that. And there's Deputy in his hand. Alongside a land. Can he set up a scenario? I think what he's wondering is if he wants to... You either have to Deputy the Death Shadow, or if you Deputy the Plague Engineer... then on next turn, if you can survive to it, you are going to have lethal.
Right. Okay, yeah, that's the idea here. With Hobbs at 2, you're just trying to make it so you can go wide.
Can you get away with hitting the Plague Engineer? And I think Barone's answer is no. And did he miss some triggers here? Oh no, Chris. And Deputy of Detention. Hold on. Maybe I'm the one here. Yeah, that's not a human. My mistake here. He's doing well. Wait, not put the counters on it.
Speaking of triggers,
Okay.
tosses Noble Hierarch in the graveyard just to grow these Thalia's lieutenants. Well, Thalia's lieutenant and a copy of Champion of the Parish, but details.
He still grows it though. Okay, that actually makes sense. Now because Hobbs is at 2, so it's still worth. Now Thalia's lieutenant is lethal.
Correct.
And form BC Oko from Hobbs. Gonna go to work. Plus, takes care of that phantasmal image.
Poof.
We look at Chris's board. He has Noble Hierarch has 0 power. The Deputy has 1 power. The Lieutenant has 2 power. It's not quite enough.
And there's a Fatal Push hanging out in Hobbs' hand, so even if Barone can get something out of the way, that's just going to end up actually being bad for Barone because it will enable Revolt.
It will enable Revolt. Phantasmal image again. Hold on. With it on the stack, is Hobbs going to push something? I suppose he doesn't have to, because Revolt will be enabled.
Right. I believe you would just want to let this resolve.
Is there any thought? What would be the worst case scenario? The worst case is, what would you not want Chris to copy?
The biggest thing is probably just this Deputy of Detention, and we already can't take that.
No, and because of how Phantasmal Images works, this Fatal Push always answers it.
Exactly.
Copies Deputy, takes the Plague Engineer. Swings the team, and there is the Fatal Push for Hobbs. Barone, I love the play. He calls Hobbs on it, says, do you have the card? But then Hobbs says, yes, I do. And now Barone's going to lose the whole board.
Oh, yeah. This is the game. This is the turning
Hobbs
point.
is going to win the rematch. right? Because Revolt's on, Deputy of Detention. Now he blocks, kills that one. All the creatures are gone. Oko's going to poof the Phantasmal Image. That's going to do it. Chris shoves all his creatures in on that last call. Wants Hobbs to show him the Fatal Push, and Hobbs shows him the Fatal Push.
Yeah, Hobbs just has to go to combat.
There's the Teamer Battle Rage to win it in style and send himself into day 2. That is the swing, and John Hobbs is your winner 2-1.
Death